Okay, so this is section 7.7. This is video number 2 of 3 total videos. This one is specifically on multiplying binomials. Binomials are equations like this that essentially are two terms. So if we were to multiply two of these together is what we are talking about with this particular situation. So let's go through essentially what we would be doing in our missing. So here we go. Our missing, we are talking about this method called, a method called the FOIL method. The FOIL method is a really helpful way that we can play around with these terms. So one thing that I want you to pay attention to is these ideas of first, outside, inside, last. So let's start all of this out. We have our first term, and essentially what we're paying attention to is our x's, the first two x's. So let's zoom out a little bit here. I have a little bit that we can pay attention to. So first we're paying attention to x times x, x times x. When we have two x's multiplied together, we essentially have x squared. After that, let's pay attention to our outside terms. So we have outside terms, x and 2. Those are our two outside terms. So we can say x times 2. And an easier way to say that is 2x. I'm only saying it just that way just because it's a little bit easier. Next, we're going to go for our inside terms. Oops, I meant to squeeze this a little bit and move ourselves over. Our inside terms are essentially this 3 and the x, 3 times x, which is equal to 3x. And last terms are these ones. We have 3 times 2. So we can now go over to the last term. So we have 3 times 2, which is equal to 6. So rewriting all of this, we can rewrite all of this as saying x squared plus 2x plus 3x plus 6. And I know some of you are probably saying right now, but Miss Beardsley, we can combine like terms. I see the same thing happening. This 2x and this 3x, they can combine together and become essentially 5x. So this problem, when rewritten, can be instead of x plus 3 times x plus 2, we can rewrite all of this as essentially this answer of x squared plus 5x plus 6. All right, that's the FOIL method, doing our first terms, essentially x times x, doing our outside terms, essentially x times 2, doing our inside terms, 3x, and our last terms. So it creates this really cool overlapping rainbow, kind of like a little dance. I like this visual a little better so you can see the inside, or the first terms and the last terms, and then inside terms and outside terms on the tops and the bottoms. So we can play around with that. Let's do one problem to practice this. This one gets a little tricky. So we're going to use the FOIL method to solve this, or to simplify this into its binomial form. 2a minus b squared times a plus 4b squared. Big problem. So our first step is to multiply our first terms. We have 2a times a, and I'm going to simply write this all out as simple as I possibly can. Then we have our outside terms. So I'm going to add 2a times 4b squared, writing them all out. Our inside terms, we have plus, I'm going to rewrite this as plus a negative b squared times a. And our last terms here. And our last terms that we're going to be multiplying are, so we have plus a negative b squared times 4b squared. So now we need to simplify. We can start out with this first set of terms. 2 times a, we can simplify that to 2a squared. Our next terms, this starts to get a little tricky. We have numbers and letters, so I'm going to put the numbers together, and I'm going to put the letters together, and I'm going to put the letters in alphabetical order, and it's just my own sort of compulsive thing. I just want them in alphabetical order because they're easier to say. It's easier to say a times b squared versus b squared times a. Just, it gets confusing in my head. And then I'm going to do the same thing with this other one. I have essentially a -1. That's what I can say here. I have a -1, then a times b squared. Doesn't matter what order I have them in. I just want to put them in alphabetical order because it's a little easier. And then my last little bit, I essentially have that -1 again, right here, times 4. And then I have b squared times b squared. Last but not least, let's finish this simplification up, see what we have going on. We have 2a squared, that's simplified. Then we've got plus 2 times 4 is 8ab squared. Then plus a -1ab squared. And then plus a -4. And then I have b squared 2 times, so that's b times b times b times b, so b to the 4th. Now, I think I'm almost done, but then I see these middle terms. This is going to happen often. It doesn't happen all the time, but it happens often. Sometimes these terms actually end up simplifying each other, which is pretty nice, and we can write them in a little simpler form. So let's write these terms in a nicer way. 8 plus ab squared plus a -1ab squared. The ab's are just going to be there. Oops, I don't want to write that in red. That's the wrong color. The ab's are just going to be there, ab squared. But 8 plus a -1, that's 7. So our final answer for this particular problem is 2 times 2a squared plus 7ab squared plus a -4b to the 4th. Final answer. I hope this helps.